JBL's controversial character switch in 2004 pitted him against WWE champion Eddie Guerrero, and it culminated at the Great American Bash 2004. We get you caught up on the whirlwind that JBL was at the time, and we get you all caught up on Smackdown from 2004, and the Podski starts now.
The Podski with John Baker. For over 1 year, the revolutionary force in audio entertainment.
Ooh, yeah!
Brother,
Let me talk to you! Freak out, freak out!
I just had an out-of-body experience!
The insane in the membrane!
Brother,
Yeah! And I'm here for only one reason, and that's to take it to the limit, yeah!
somebody stop the damn man!
I'm living on the edge.
Who is your daddy?
Hello and welcome to the Podski. I am your host, Johnny Bakeshow, and ringside with me is Teddy Mongoose. Today is all about the Great American Bash as we switch over from the Raw brand to the Smackdown brand in 2004. But before we dive into that, we want to remind you all that the subscriber rewards bonus episode, Ravishing Reflections, the Rick Rude bonus episode, is available now. Thank you to all of the new subscribers. We unlocked the Eddie Guerrero show. So the Eddie Guerrero show has been unlocked, but we want to remind you all that we're not going to get that out as fast as possible because of this show that we're doing today, which is the Great American Bash. And we don't want to overlap our content, and we don't want to give everything about the Eddie Guerrero title run away here on this show. We want to save that for the Eddie bonus show, which you will be getting soon. We don't have a timetable on that, so just be expecting it soon. And the last time that we talked about SmackDown at length here was way back at the WrestleMania 20 show. And you came in with a hammer at the end of that show, where we closed with Kurt Angle being injured, completely out of action, and that led to the creation of the JBL character. So how did the breakup of the APA lead to all of this, with JBL coming in as a new character and filling in the shoes of Kurt Angle?
And not just Kurt Angle, but Brock Lesnar.
Yes,
Because-
that is another
because
big
Brock-
part too.
Yeah, because Brock left too. One thing, we're going to run through the timeline here, but this is going to be Brock free. There's a whole lot of Brock stuff, but it's really all with him just getting tryouts and whatnot. So Brock at this point in time is NFL bound. So we find ourselves in the timeline from SmackDown from the March 18th show, 2004. The APA is mocking SmackDown general manager Paul Heyman. This causes Paul Heyman to order a tag match between the two versus Rikishi and Scotty 2 Hotty. It's a main event anywhere in the world.
Oh my God, we can't get the things that we cannot get away from on this show. It's Scotty 2 Hotty and Bob Holly.
Yep. So APA's
Done.
jobs are on the line. Okay. So Heyman took it personally that they were making fun of him, and APA's jobs are on the line. The APA loses. Heyman fires Farouk, and he tells Bradshaw to worry about himself because he's too valuable of an asset to the company. And I remembered in reading this, I remembered seeing that and thinking, really? Like, I don't mean that in a bad way, but like, really? Like, just
Yeah.
APA guy? So Dave says the Simmons firing was at least interesting to watch play out since it aired the day after his firing was announced. So he was shoot released. So it was interesting that Bradshaw did the job in the match since he was the one staying and supposedly is in line for a push. I think it's just past the time that they could do much with Bradshaw.
Wow.
First thing he puts out there. As noted, the angle was to set up Bradshaw going heel and to get rid of Ron Simmons. Basically what happened was when Heyman gave that little talk to JBL, Simmons was gone and walked away and sort of was looking at JBL like, hey, you coming with me? And JBL's like, no, I'm going to stay. Simmons turns 45 years old in May. The company offered to put him in alcohol rehab. He refused. There were some other things that were going on, not one single incident that caused to his release. Basically, what the company said was his time was up. So Simmons was talking about retirement beforehand. Again, 45 years old. And so he's going in another direction. He's going to be done. And now so is JBL. So that brings us to the brand split lottery. So Dave writes, what was billed as a night that would change the face of WWE wound up simply being an entertaining shuffling of mid-carders and not really addressing the major problem, leaving SmackDown at present with the weakest pay-per-view main event in modern company history scheduled for May. So Lesnar is now gone. He was the face of the brand since Hogan left in August 2002. They passed the top spot to Eddie, but the heel side is weak. Vince decided on a lottery even before Angle called him the morning after Mania 20 with numbness in his fingers. The idea was to keep Angle on the show, keep him engaged as he is a draw, and place him as the GM. This then removes Heyman and allows him to be a now heel manager, which is a smart idea. So he would be the guy that would ready the heel for Eddie. So basically he would get him ready, fire him up, and then have him challenge for the championship. He also notes that this would involve Heyman to get involved with programs with Cena to help him get over better as a babyface as well. So they believe that Heyman's talents are better used as a manager to get talent over directly as opposed to the GM role. So Angle was told that he wouldn't need surgery. And as of this issue, which is in March of 2004, was looking to be out, quote, a few weeks. Ends up being longer than that, obviously. He would then return, work a limited schedule, and then Dave says that him being on a limited schedule would be a permanent thing. Not quite.
Not quite.
Not quite. So this leaves the void of actual heel wrestlers that are on the SmackDown brand.
So go back and check out the WrestleMania 20 show where we read about Eddie's lack of challengers, and the writing is on the wall for what we're about to get to fill the void. And that's at the end of that episode. So be sure, if you're going to listen to it, check it out the whole way through until the end.
So to catch everybody up from that, Big Show needs both knees and his elbows operated on. And the day after Mania, Chavo was the number 2 heel on the SmackDown roster.
Yes.
We go into more depth in that Mania show. So it looked like the problem was completely solved when Triple H was drafted by Paul Heyman and put on the show against Eddie in a title match. That was a Raw.
Yes.
But on SmackDown, we found out that Triple H was traded back to Raw in exchange for Booker T and the Dudleys. So with that, John, do you want to catch us up on the new SmackDown editions in 2004?
Yes, the new acquisitions for SmackDown post-draft were Rene Dupree, Mark Jindrak, with the working idea that Teddy Long would be managing him, which that is really interesting because he was one of the guys that was supposed to be in Evolution and then got booted from that.
Yeah.
We also got RVD, Spike Dudley, Bubba and Devon Dudley, Teddy Long, Booker T, my man Rico, and Jackie Gata.
Okay, so not a lot to freshen up the place.
You
know what I'm saying? Like it's just in as respectfully as possible, it's just all mid, right? Like with the exception of Booker T.
That's what we said on the Backlash 04 show when we highlighted the draft, was that it was the mid draft of all time. There was no big movers. Triple H was the move, and then they literally brought him right back to Raw the following week because obviously, bro, that doesn't work for me, brother.
Yep. Okay, so Booker T's been moved into the lead heel spot, but the Triple H trade does diminish his value in that role because it was Booker and 2 other guys for one.
Right.
Do you know what I'm saying? Like, and that sucks. Like it's not Booker's fault, but you're saying that these 3 guys equal this one. So the heel side is so weakened that the plan for the next SmackDown pay-per-view, Judgment Day in Los Angeles, is for Guerrero to defend against Bradshaw, who may or may not be managed at that point by Heyman, and is looking at getting a shot in the lead heel role for reasons few can fathom, since he's looked bad in the ring for a long time. Dave then says, it would be a miracle if Guerrero, a great worker, but not a great carrier of weak foes, would be able to get a WWE quality pay-per-view main event out of him. Bless your soul, Eddie, man.
For real.
Bless your soul. Because they got 2.
Yes.
it's even more doubtful a Guerrero versus Bradshaw match is going to do a buy rate, or that a program between the two wouldn't cool off Guerrero. Bradshaw reportedly did not get over strong in his new gimmick where he brags about his financial acumen. So with that, this would leave The Undertaker probably going with the Big Show, Booker, or perhaps Kurt Angle as a foe if Angle can come back. Dave says if the Guerrero-Bradshaw plan changes and sanity prevails, this would leave Show, who Guerrero's never had good matches with, and he noted that in that Mania show, Booker and Angle as his only real possible foes. To wrap up the lottery, it does pop a big number. It does a 4.49, which is the biggest number since March 03 when Austin returned after quitting. That show did a 4.53. Dave doesn't expect a long-term bump, though, citing the draft pattern from 2002. That show did a 5.49, and then in May of that year, they were averaging a 3.97. So big bump for these big changes, and then it's not sustained is basically what he's thinking. There's the background. Why don't you take us through the debut of John Bradshaw Layfield?
So our introduction to JBL came on March 25th, 2004 edition of SmackDown. JBL comes out in a white suit and a cowboy hat, tells us he has a radio show starting and a new book coming out, and he's a financial analyst on Fox News. He said the only reason that he hasn't succeeded in wrestling is because he was all about drinking beer and having a good time, but now he's serious. He then interfered in a Booker T versus EddieGuerrero main event and laid out Eddie.
And what's crazy about this is that when I saw this, and I'm not lying, man, I was like, oh, and I didn't know that how he would turn out, but essentially he might as well have been Mordecai, dude.
Might as well have been.
You know what I mean? Like, just come out, big goofy gimmick. You know, you just had occult symbols drawn on your chest for how long, and then all of a sudden you were just playing poker for a couple of years, and now you're really rich and really mean.
How did that happen?
But you know what? That's what makes wrestling beautiful. So Meltzer says John Layfield debuted as the top heel to fill Lesnar's shoes. This was hardly a strong debut. He dressed in the suit and cowboy hat, looked like a cross between J.R. Ewing and Colonel Robert Parker from WCW. He reminded me of a Southern small territory regional heel. They may get people to chant, "You sold out," but he showed me nothing that would make him an effective top heel. So Dave is not impressed.
Wow. Also of note on this show, Kurt Angle comes out to Triple H's music and announces Triple H has been traded. So we mentioned that with the draft lottery. Eddie gave a locker room speech and Booker T insulted Eddie's belt, calling it minor league. Guerrero and Booker ended up in a backstage brawl. Eddie beat Booker via DQ in the main event where Bradshaw interfered and laid out Guerrero.
So Dave says it's a good show, but SmackDown comes off as a secondary promotion. And so we do, you know, we have new things starting, but it seems B League from the jump. Okay, so the debut happens, and after the first TV, there were already people second guessing the Guerrero versus Bradshaw main event pay-per-view direction. Raw crowds have been noticeably up, but there's not been the same increase evident in SmackDown crowds. So for the April 1st SmackDown show, Dave says, SmackDown is missing something. Maybe it'll work, but the Layfield character is doing nothing for me, and the show is built around him. I'm not sold on Angle as a GM either, but I'm guessing that's temporary. So, John, give us the highlights of this one.
JBL came out in a white limo with the Longhorns on the hood. I love me some Longhorns on a hood, man. This entrance is so great. He had a Hispanic limo driver with the subtle racial dig, and Layfield told the driver that he needs to learn English to become successful like him. Eddie lays out Rey Mysterio and Spike Dudley after a match as well, so we can see exactly what we're getting here with JBL.
Right out of the gate, man. Dave says, well, when you're getting over a former underneath guy as a pay-per-view main event challenger, he does need to lay some waste to people.
The big angle, though, was when Guerrero grabbed JBL's cowboy hat and fans poured all kinds of beer and food in it. One person spit in it. Guerrero then stomped the cowboy hat. Of course, Layfield was upset. Guerrero threw the hat into the audience, and this was pretty great.
And after the show was over, Layfield did a promo in the ring until the Undertaker came out, laid him out with a choke slam and a tombstone. And Dave said, I thought it was way early in the game to already humiliate the heel that you need to work extra hard to get heat on. And I don't know if I'm just like forcing these memories upon myself 20 years later, but I can remember thinking that, like, when I just told you that he came out and I was like, oh, here's the new whatever, Tyson Tomko, whatever this is going to be. And now he's getting geeked out. And I was just like, oh, he's going to get fed to Eddie.
Right.
Literally, that was all I thought. He's just going to get fed to Eddie. So some non-JBL tidbits going on right now. Dave says the Dudleys are looking to go heel before the pay-per-view in LA. Kenzo Suzuki's first program may be with Billy Gunn. And Dave says, I quote, and I'll bet anything that one's a disaster waiting to happen, end quote. And then I should note that Raw crowds still going up, not been the same increase evident in SmackDown. So moving on to the next week, we're in April 12th edition of the Observer newsletter for the time capsule. So Eddie starts beating Bradshaw in main events on house shows. The finish here is Angle throws a belt to Bradshaw. Eddie intercepts, hits Bradshaw with it, hits the frog splash, and gets the pin. They did a different twist to the match at a show in Dallas where Eddie wins clean with a frog splash. Angle comes out, says that he's made a mistake and forgot to tell both of them that it was a 2 out of 3 falls match. Angle's so funny, dude. I could just hear him. Oh, I'm sorry. I made a mistake.
Yeah. Yes, he is so good in his GM role.
Dave doesn't like it. We'll get to that. But he cracks me up, man. So Layfield won the second fall then with a clothesline. Third fall was the same finish that they'd done with the ref bump before, where Angle throws the belt to Layfield. Eddie catches it, lays him out, and then beats him. So that's what we got going on in the house shows. What do we got going on the TV, John?
Yes, the April 8th SmackDown, the show long story is getting JBL over as much as possible as a dirty, rotten heel. The highlight was the segment at the end where he booted Rudy Boy Gonzalez back into Mexico. That's the border episode. If you want to go check that out, it's the April 8th, 2004 SmackDown. In playing the character, he actually was doing a good job here, I thought.
Yeah, absolutely. Dave says, I don't really have much interest in seeing Layfield headline a pay-per-view or even seeing him wrestle, but the character is growing on me as a heel after this show. His promos go too long, but he was strong in doing a knockoff of the old Ted DiBiase $1 Million Man character, and I still sense the May pay-per-view is going to do poorly. So growing on Dave here. Was not growing on me in live time, so I give Dave credit for having a more open mind than I did at that time.
Hindsight 2020, my eyes, now good heel work. Back then, hated this guy. Hated him with all my might.
And the thing is, they'll tell us that that's what he's supposed to be and that's what it's supposed to do. My problem with JBL was and always will be that he literally went from dude to main event guy, and there was no climb to the top. I think that was my issue with it.
Yeah.
Was that it's not like he was out there over the course of 3 months or half a year or whatever and, worked his way up the card or anything like that. I think that's sort of where my resentment of that character really comes from, was that he was just flopped into our lap like that.
Yeah, it literally happened over the course of a week. And he was literally exactly what you said. He was the beer drinking, card playing dude with a fake door. And then all of a sudden he's your main event talent, and it just repackaged a week later. He didn't go to the mid card. He didn't challenge anybody for the US title. He just went right to the main event.
Now, to his credit, and this is me being an adult, being able to look and see this with hindsight. Good job by you, dude.
Amen.
It's
Amen.
not like he didn't put everything into it, and I do respect him a lot for that. Especially going through this stuff and reading through this, I do. I give him a lot of respect for that.
Absolutely. Being a 12-year-old, no respect. Being a 31-year-old, much respect.
Yep. So our non-JBL news at this point in time, and I only had this here because of our episode last week where we covered the Sable lawsuit.
Yes.
The Rock told Howard Stern on 4/2 that he purchased the rights to use his name, The Rock, from Vince. He said the negotiations were easy. And Stern said that Vince must have lost his mind. The note that I have here is The Rock's deal is expiring soon, and the WWE will lose executive producer title on his movies when it does. So that is a chunk of change that'll be out of their coffers. However, if you're them, it's the opposite of Sable. Whereas Sable needed the name for the commercial value, with The Rock, he was almost getting so big to where they needed to let him have it to hope that he would come back.
Yes.
You know what I'm saying? And my other note here is many are openly saying that Booker T proclaiming SmackDown as a B team roster or show was good for heat, but counterproductive on TV. SmackDown is struggling, and while Booker's promo isn't the reason, it drives it home to the fans. On house shows at this time, Booker comes out, buries the SmackDown as minor leagues, and then gets tombstoned in a minute by the Undertaker. But again, he's saying it over and over again. And for my weekly, hey, let me compare this to AEW moment, just turn that into a segment. This is shades of Dave being so stop it whenever MJF was burying AEW a year ago.
Yeah.
Because what you're doing is you're telling fans things that people are saying right to them.
Right.
Or even maybe not even things that people are saying, but things that people might be feeling. Like when you're saying it out loud, it sort of manifests itself.
Right.
And that does not work, dude. It really doesn't.
It doesn't. It is counterproductive.
So we're here at the April 19th edition of The Observer. Dave says the star-lacking SmackDown show on 4/8, so that was the episode that John had just noted with the border crossing, fell to a 2.96 rating, which is a 3.44 realistic rating, an estimated 4.81 million viewers, which is the lowest rating in months. It was even behind the Iraq show on Christmas night and the Thanksgiving night shows, both of which did a 3.0. The keynote in the ratings is that it started out terribly, with the first quarter hour being the Layfield promo, doing the $1 Million Man act, and it doing a 2.60. Dave then goes on to say that people are saying daylight savings is an excuse and saying why it's not an excuse. And the last 4 years, Dave Meltzer talks about daylight savings impacting wrestling all the time.
He does.
So I give him credit. I give him credit for evolving. But yeah, in this issue, he's saying, "Oh, this is no excuse." It kind of is. Not a real one, but at least gives some credence to why the number might be lower. All right, man. So what's the next week's edition of SmackDown look like?
Yes, this is the April 15th SmackDown, and this is where Angle books a match for Eddie versus JBL. Bradshaw says he's tired and asked for the match at the pay-per-view instead. His character is sort of morphing into this like political candidate as well as like this dastardly rich asshole. The evolution of this character happened right before our eyes. Like it's so crazy. It's excellent work.
Yeah. And Dave says it's very campy, but not in a serious way that a main event character should be.
Also on this show, they had the Big Show do an I Quit angle after losing to Eddie. And this was to write him off to get the surgery that he needs on literally all 4 of his extremities. After he lost, he went crazy and chokeslammed Angle off the ledge. And Angle is laying splatted like Wile E. Coyote in a pool of blood. This was ridiculous. I remember watching these SmackDowns as they aired, and I was terrified out of my mind that they just killed Kurt Angle on television. Like they had hook, line, and sinker. They had me for this.
The pool of blood behind his head and everything, man. Yeah, they went all the way with it.
Wilson just standing there. It was yes, all of this. I remember all of this as a 12-year-old. I remember every single week of this.
These are the best times, man. Like that's what makes these shows fun, is whenever you really get that like clicking on, oh my gosh, here's my nostalgia buttons going here. Yes. There was a house show match between Eddie and JBL in Iowa that was reportedly not good, lost crowd interest big time, but the next show was said to be better than expected. Layfield is still not over strong in buildings. They're still doing the same belt hit finish. They go to Indiana State, and then Layfield grabs the microphone to get over as a heel, starts ripping on Larry Bird, and then saying that Bird couldn't hold Dr. J or Magic Johnson's jockstrap, among other things. And there were things. So if you were privy to what was said there, we will not say those on the Podski. But JBL's trying to get himself some cheap heat at this time. SmackDown's ratings are in a free fall right now, as the 415 show drew a 2.90 rating, 3.37 realistic, 4.71 million viewers overall. The high point, though, and I did want to note this, was the EddieGuerrero versus Big Show match. That match gained 479,000 viewers and got it up to a 3.19. And this is, I'll tease Eddie here, because this is what's very sad, is that they are cratering.
Mm-hmm.
And Eddie isn't cratering.
No.
And Eddie's really taking it as if he's cratering.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? It's sad to see happen. All right, brothers. So take us on to the next week's SmackDown.
Yes, we are at the April 22nd SmackDown. JBL pinned a dude named El Gran, who was played by Paul London, billed as a Mexican heavyweight champion. He wore a Mexican championship belt. Layfield totally humiliated him. He would laugh at El Gran whenever he was doing lucha. So, I mean, like, I vaguely remember this one. This was just weird. For the other saying that you could see him doing it though, right? Oh,
like,
yeah.
Like he's going for a roll. He's going for a toss, whatever. And then James, Yeah, I can see it.
Yeah. For the other big story, Angle was off the show to sell the injury, so Heyman is the GM for the week. He calls out RVD and the Dudleys for falling off. The Dudleys then turn and beat down RVD for their turn heel, and Heyman will manage them. In the main event, JBL laid out Eddie with a clothesline after Eddie lost to the Dudleys in a handicap match.
So Dave said it was better than the previous few weeks, but I still feel like it's a distant B show. Still, there wasn't a good match on the show. Eddie is flattening out, and Cena is the only other superstar on the roster. Eddie is very banged up, but will not take time off. On house shows at this time, JBL is playing the stand-in for GM for the injured Kurt Angle. So after Kurt got thrown off the ledge, JBL comes in. He's the heel GM for the night. He wrestles in the main event, and that main event was Bradshaw and Rene Dupree versus John Cena and Bob Holly.
My Lord.
You couldn't even make that match on 2K, dude.
Dude, if I went to a house show and that was the main event, I'd be pissed.
Okay, so Cena pins Dupree with the FU in that match, and we are on to the next edition of SmackDown. What you got, John?
The next week is the April 29th SmackDown, where JBL did a political ad-style video talking about how despicable it is that they teach Spanish in American schools because illegal immigrants won't learn our language. After Big Show's assault on Angle, Angle was told he can never wrestle again, and he brought out his new bodyguard, Luther Reigns. Eddie beats Bubba in the main event, and my word, do I remember Luther Reigns. I was scared of that dude. That dude was huge, and he was in WCW. I had no idea that he was in WCW.
And the crazier thing here is how many Dudleys are in main events at this point in time.
Yeah.
It's nuts, man.
It is not.
So Dave says that Reigns is a great talker and a bad wrestler. So of course they have him be Silent Muscle. House shows that week are the same. Guerrero's winning, beating JBL with the belt shot. So that's the finish that they've been running with over and over again. The 429 SmackDown did a 3.09 rating, 3.63 realistic, 5.02 million viewers. I note this because it does go against one of the final episodes of Friends that did a 15.52 rating, as well as Survivor that did a 12.15, and CSI that did a 16.16. So there's big time competition on this night, and it still does over a 3.0 after dipping down. The Eddie Bubba main event gained 255,000 viewers to a 3.23. So again, shows are down, ratings are down, houses are going to start to dip, but Eddie's drawing them, man. He is.
I will say that it's no fault to me because I was tuning in every single week. I was hot on UPN, man.
So we wrapped up the month of April, and so here's some business comparisons. So the average SmackDown rating in April 2003 was a 3.22. The average SmackDown rating in April 2004 is down to a 3.04. So that's down 5.6%. In March 2004, so the previous month, it was a 3.30. Sort of unfair because that's WrestleMania season. So you have the Mania bump.
You get the bomb.
So Dave says the realistic SmackDown rating of 3.53 was significantly below Raw. However, total audience for SmackDown this month averaged 4.94 million viewers. So it's still ahead of Raw only because there's more homes that have UPN than Spike. Those numbers are both well down from the 3.84 and 3.94 realistic range from the prior 3 months and the 5.54 to 5.56 million viewers that it were doing. We can pretty much show that the loss of talent and probably more lousy shows overall have caused the audience drop of 11.8% from what had been the normal range. This kind of 1 month TV ratings drop is significant enough to show that this is a problem. Okay, dude, so we are now at a pivotal point in this JBL timeline. Okay, so we have gotten to the May 10th Observer newsletter. We have coverage of a May 2nd house show in El Paso.
Oh my, I know exactly what you're going to talk about.
So we have the big angle where Eddie's mom suffers a heart attack due to an attack by Layfield. In the match, Guerrero gets the pin, thanks the crowd, says how proud he is to return home to El Paso as the champion. He brings his family into the ring. He gives his wife flowers. And since it's close to Mother's Day, he brings mom into the ring and he gives her flowers too. So Layfield comes back into the ring, clotheslines Eddie, and attacks Eddie's mom. Officials come to break it up. Layfield poses with the belt. Eddie's mom gets stretchered out, and Eddie sold this great by the accounts that were there. Dave says, I think everyone realized how dead that Guerrero JBL was as a pay-per-view main event, so they're going to desperate storyline lengths to shoot it with adrenaline. From what we understand, they were thrilled with Guerrero's daughters and how they pulled off their roles. Apparently, Eddie's mother's blood pressure legitimately went up while she was in the ring because of the excitement and pressure of the angle, although nobody knew it until afterwards, but she ended up fine. So take us through the show after that, John.
Yes, this is the May 6th SmackDown, and they start the show by airing the footage from the house show. I remember turning on SmackDown, and I remember seeing this, and man, it was a lot to watch. Layfield was then interviewed via satellite because he wasn't there. Layfield said it wasn't his fault, and Guerrero had no business bringing his family into the ring, and said Guerrero's mother was faking her heart attack. Booker T went to a psychic and she put him under a spell. So this was possibly the seed sown for the Bookie Man we talked about last week on the show. Eddie then goes on to beat Bubba in your main event.
So after the show aired, Meltzer said that it was, quote, tremendous, the angle. He called Eddie's wife and kids' performances incredible. He said it was so well done. If it was 15 years ago, it would have drawn well. And if it was 25 years ago, it would have been one of the big money angles of all time. He also says that it's a shame that they ran this after they killed Al Wilson. Before the show, Eddie brought his daughters in to meet JBL. They talked about exactly what was going to happen, that grandma wasn't going to be hurt. Eddie's mom had a legit anxiety attack from the excitement before they went out. And then Dave says, which is, I agree here, if they ran with that and not the heart attack, it would have made the angle that much better. Probably. Because when, as an audience, when we hear heart attack and then she's okay, like it sort of makes you know that it's a work, right?
Yeah.
But if she gets attacked and has an anxiety attack, you can really empathize more. Yeah. Like, and I agree with them there. The ratings for this, we talked about this with the Bad Blood show, that 510 Raw was all built up to be huge, huge, huge.
Yes.
And SmackDown got bludgeoned as well. Going against the final episode of Friends, SmackDown on 5/6 delivered among the lowest rated non-holiday numbers in its history, a 2.78, which was 4.52 million viewers. The final episode of Friends did a 29.80 rating, which nearly doubled the rating of the episode the previous week. The other thing I want to note is that JBL has left Fox and started working for CNBC. For the Odessa House Show note, Guerrero goes over Bradshaw, belt shot, and frog splash to end the show. The reports are that this match has improved a ton since they first started doing it, and that it should be fine on pay-per-view. So we're looking up here. We go to the May 17th Observer. Very bad house show week for both crews, Raw and SmackDown, as far as attendance goes. I don't know if anyone even thinks TV angles help house show attendance, but if anyone was hoping the Guerrero angle was the turnaround, live event attendance sure didn't reflect it. The house show matches have now changed. Eddie's not doing the lowrider gimmick. He comes out, just goes berserk. He gets DQ'd at about the 5-minute mark after hitting JBL with a chair shot. So they're doing a really good job in heating this up.
Yeah,
because why have a guy that just had someone attack his mother and then have her have this ailment afterwards? You know, why have him come out in his car and smile and wave? They have him come out, dude, and just look for blood 5 minutes and then hit him with a chair or whatever. I think that's smart booking. Okay, man, so take us into the next week's SmackDown.
The May 13th SmackDown is the go-home show for the pay-per-view Judgment Day. JBL is not in the building. Instead, he's driving around in his limo. Eddie has been waiting for him all day. The limo arrives. Eddie destroys it with a pipe, but JBL isn't in it. JBL does show up, has Eddie arrested. Eddie charges JBL with his hands in cuffs, and JBL then beats him down and demands Eddie is charged with assault. Chavo Classic pinned Jacqueline in a non-title match in the setup for the one arm behind them back match at the pay-per-view. JBL wins the main event, pinning Mysterio clean, then says he hopes Mrs. Guerrero has another heart attack watching her son lose. My gosh.
This guy, dude. This guy.
Heat magnet.
He is. And look, man, I hate to say it, but when I read, I hope that Mrs. Guerrero has another heart attack watching her son lose, I laughed out loud.
I know.
Oh my God, what a thing to say. Okay, so SmackDown has a house show canceled for 5/22. This is the week after Judgment Day due to a poor advance. So not looking good.
I had no idea. That's crazy.
We are now at Judgment Day 2004, May 16th, 2004. The best match poll in the Observer poll that week was Eddie Guerrero versus John Layfield, after Dave was scared to death of it to begin with, after I thought that it was Eddie getting, just the heel machine fed to him, and after John was terrified of the limo with the bullhorns on front. So the WWE Judgment Day pay-per-view needed a home run going into the main event, and Eddie Guerrero and John Bradshaw Layfield responded with one of the bloodiest matches in company history. When the night was over, the ring was filled with puddles of Guerrero's blood, and Guerrero himself, after the adrenaline wore off, went into shock and had to be rushed to the hospital in an ambulance due to excessive blood loss. After the TV cameras went off, he collapsed in the ring from blood loss and had to be helped backstage, where an ambulance was called. Guerrero took 16 stitches to the forehead from the ridiculously deep cut. At the hospital, they suggested him get a blood transfusion, but he turned it down. They pumped 2 bags of fluid into him for a while before letting him go at 1 a.m. that night. He didn't wrestle house shows the next night in Palm Springs, but came out of it okay and is expected to wrestle this coming weekend. Because of the no DQ finish, Guerrero retained the WWE title, and this sets up a rematch for Great American Bash next month. The show promised little going in and delivered on what was expected. The show did draw a legit sellout, 18,722 fans. Paid attendance was about 13,500 with a gate of 813,000, which was the second largest live gate in the history of California wrestling. Wow. So that's a big deal, man. It really is. Dave notes a dead crowd for many of the matches, and the fact that fans pay $34.95 for that product at home, that's not as good as the free matches they've been able to see for the past 2 months on Raw, hurts more. Based on the volume of responses for the Observer poll, the early predictions of this show doing well below average buy rate look to be the case, as we got less responses for this show than any WWE pay-per-view in recent years. So, John, just run us down the card quick, would you?
RVD and Rey Mysterio beat the Dudleys. Booker T did a promo with strange voices coming out of a room with candles lit, but it's not voodoo yet. So Bookie Man was a thing. Tori Wilson beat Dawn Marie. Mordecai debuted, pinning Scotty 2 Hottie in a match, which Dave gave a dud. Rico and Charlie Haas beat Bob Holly with Billy Gunn. What a match, my lord.
Yeah.
There's no way that was good. Chavo beat Jacqueline with one hand behind the back to win back his cruiserweight title, and John Cena beat Rene Dupree. We also had The Undertaker pinning Booker T as well. But the big match was JBL beating Eddie Guerrero via DQ. So Guerrero, because of the DQ finish, gets to keep the WWE Championship. Layfield came out to a surprising lack of reaction at first, but after he cut the promo and guaranteed victory, the crowd turned immediately and they started getting into it. They brawled early. Guerrero took a bump onto the Spanish announce table and it didn't break. That also happens later on at the show we're going to talk about later. After Eddie tackled the ref, Layfield hit Guerrero with a chair shot to the head.
Dave says Guerrero bladed, and that's hardly the word. It was coming out of his forehead like a faucet.
Oh, if you watch this back, it is brutal. It is squirting out of his head. Layfield hit the clothesline, but no ref. Little Nate slides in for the count and is immediately bumped. JBL hit a power bomb, and Guerrero kicked out.
So Dave says by this point, the ring was like a canvas after a red paint explosion.
Eddie hits a DDT but misses a frog splash. JBL gets the belt while the ref is distracted, but Guerrero takes it, hits JBL in front of the ref, and the DQ is called. The collective groan from the audience as well as myself. My word, the post-match had numerous belt shots by Guerrero on Layfield as he went crazy. JBL busted wide open. Eddie hits him with a frog splash and a chair shot to end the show.
And Dave gave it 3 3/4 stars. And I don't know.
This was
what's crazy? What's crazy is that before we started to go back through this, I initially thought that this was the match that Eddie lost the title in.
Oh, you know what? Honestly, I did too. I thought he lost that match until we were talking about it and everything. You're right.
Yeah, and it's only because he bleeds so much. You know what I'm saying? Like I just associated that with it. But so we'll move on to the May 31st edition of The Observer. The company will be doing 3 pay-per-views in a 6-week period, unprecedented for the company, with Raw's Bad Blood on June 13th and SmackDown's Great American Bash and Raw's Vengeance to follow, with 2 weeks between each event. This precedes the summer's major event, SummerSlam, on 8/15 in Toronto. So Meltzer then writes about the difficulty that Eddie and JBL are going to have drawing again, as they threw so much heat into the angle at first. There was so much blood in the match, and now they have to compete against the Hell in a Cell match 2 weeks later.
I know.
So you're going to need stips and stuff, but you're about to get a Hell in a Cell war to your blow off that, really makes this 2-month feud look like small potatoes in comparison. So it's a tough spot that they're in.
It is.
So because Raw will be promoting Vengeance off of the Hell in a Cell match, the Great American Bash could be a show that people skip, which could hurt the buy rate even more. So about the Judgment Day buy rate, Dave says, even if it's bad, Layfield and the WWE deserve a lot of credit for trying to make quickly a new top guy and for his performance in that role. If it isn't bad, they ought to throw a party for him. Granted, they went to extremes, but the two also saved what would have been a bad show. I know it sounds funny with ratings down and my own skepticism, but his performance in this role was far more than I expected. SmackDown had nothing on that side that was going to draw last month. So he talks about Layfield going from being a guy that was an afterthought to a role that was basically top man. And even though it was a very fast push to the top, the reality is, and his words are, if they didn't have him and put either Booker T in that spot or turned Rob Van Dam or even went with Undertaker versus Guerrero, which I'm thinking at this point is a direction they don't want to go in with the Undertaker character, the odds are the number would have been the same, if not worse. So Dave's giving props to JBL here, man.
Mm-hmm.
He also says the current role for Kurt Angle is hurting him, and even when he returns, there are serious questions about his physical durability. He's saying for the basically tailspinning SmackDown ratings and interest right now, that there's always Vince McMahon and Paul Heyman as strong television characters. Before more erosion is done, McMahon probably needs to return to a regular role on the show. And then final update here before we get into the next SmackDown. Angle says that he's probably not going to undergo neck surgery. The plan is to be out of the ring rehabbing for the next few months and then return around August with SummerSlam as the target. I also wanted to note, and there was like a full paragraph about this, but it wasn't worth going through it all, that there is currently internal backlash on Cena, mostly regarding his in-ring work. People are saying that he hasn't improved, and that shows that he doesn't want to put the time in, quote unquote. And
what happens next year?
Sour grapes. You know what I'm saying? Like that's all that is I imagine that's some vet on the roster that spells their spot about to get taken, that's whispering to Dave that we're losing faith in John Cena.
Sounds like Bob Holly.
Perfect transition, brother John. Give us the SmackDown after Judgment Day.
Yes, the May 20th SmackDown after Judgment Day. Eddie came out with 16 stitches. He rubs JBL's cowboy hat on his ass and challenges JBL to a match. JBL declines. Angle books a 6-man match instead. Really illogical, as Eddie will literally never be weaker than what he is right now for a one-on-one match.
He has no blood in his body.
Right. He literally has no blood left. What would... Cena loses via countout to Rene Dupree to set up a lumberjack match. Chavo Classic, not Chavo Jr., Chavo Classic wins the Cruiserweight Championship after falling onto Chavito, who just took a Dudley dog from Spike Dudley in the 3-way match. EddieGuerrero gets jumped backstage before the 6-man starts, so the main event is 3-on-2. JBL and the Dudleys versus Mysterio and RVD with the eventually injured Eddie. Eddie does come back. He gets the hot tag, hits the 3 Amigos, and then collapses like Shawn Michaels in 1995 after the Owen Enziguri. Layfield gets the tag, makes the ref count to 3, and Eddie is stretchered out. Terrifying, man.
Yeah. And so I guess that I will give you a pass because you were me when I saw Shawn.
Yeah.
Like when Shawn got kicked by Owen, I was like, well, that's it.
Yep.
My favorite wrestler is gone. And then when they announced him coming back, dude, you know what I'm saying? It just started, like I was ready for war. Yeah. I was so jazzed. And so I absolutely can speak your language here on this one, because it's devastating as a child to see a man collapse, especially after you know that he just bled gallons all over the place a couple of days earlier.
Right.
So get ready for this, brother. The Bash lineup at this point is Guerrero versus Layfield in a bull rope match for the title, Undertaker versus the Dudleys in a handicap match, John Cena versus Booker T for the U.S. title, Rob Van Dam versus Rene Dupree in a flag match, Rey Mysterio versus Mark Jindrak, Rico and Charlie Haas versus Chavo Classic and Chavo Guerrero for the tag titles, and a Tori Wilson and Miss Jackie versus Sable, or possibly Jacqueline, and Dawn Marie in 3 separate events, which sounds like a summer version of last year's horrible Redneck Challenge. The first event will be a chicken fight in the ocean. The second will be a beach volleyball game. The final will be a sandbox match.
My Lord.
Thank God that didn't happen, dude.
Thank God. Whoever stopped that from happening, thank you, because that would have been so bad.
Eddie was off of house shows this week to sell his injuries and rest his real ones. And Cena was actually the main babyface on these shows. Interesting little note there. So we're moving on to the June 7th, 2004 Observer newsletter. In news that was not unexpected, the preliminary figures for the 5/16 Judgment Day pay-per-view headlined by Guerrero and JBL were 205,000 buys, or a 0.38% buy rate. The number would rank it from a buy rate standpoint as one of the 3 lowest in company history, along with 2 1996 In Your House shows, which is when that company was in its doldrums.
Yes.
You know, that was it. It was actually the one was Vader and Owen Hart and Davey Boy versus Shawn, Psycho Sid, and Ahmed Johnson. And the other one was Bret Hart versus Sid,
Man.
which by their very natures were considered B shows at the time, literally were presented as that. And it was the weakest period from a pay-per-view standpoint in company history. The preliminary number usually does end up growing, often by 10 to 15%. It would be down 17% from the last SmackDown brand pay-per-view, which was Guerrero versus Brock Lesnar in the title change in February, which has not grown in the latest estimates since the original 248,000 figure came out. But it wasn't far below the preliminary number for the Raw Armageddon pay-per-view in December, which we need to watch sometime.
We do.
With Triple H versus Kane versus Bill Goldberg in a three-way for the title that did 220,000 buys. Current estimate of that is now 255. You know, next December, that'll be 25 years. So we should probably do that.
Yes, we should.
The angle with Eddie's mom looked like it helped slightly, but it does not look good for the Great American Bash, which is the return and will not be able to match a heat angle like that. Dave said that it's unfair to blame Bradshaw for the bad number because no one on the eligible roster would have done better, but the jury's still out if he's a main event guy or not. He does not expect Great American Bash or Vengeance to do anything more than 175 to 240,000 buys. So even though SmackDown's buy rate was way down, he's thinking that Vengeance is going to fill this too because of the back-to-back-to-back kind of deal. And then he says, to be honest, when the singular brand pay-per-view concept was announced last year, 2003, I figured the buys to be around 225,000, figuring people would skip the brand exclusive shows knowing the big shows were now fully defined. But the first year saw the split brand shows average 297,000 buys apiece. And that was a huge success. But they've been on a steady slide ever since. So we wrap up May with our May business comparisons. SmackDown ratings in May 2003 were 3.27. Average SmackDown rating in May 2004 is down to 2.93. So we're down 10.4%. The April 2004 average rating was 3.04. So it's even down from the month prior.
Wow.
The May 2003 pay-per-view Judgment Day did a 0.62 buy rate and $4.81 million in company pay-per-view revenue. The 2004 Judgment Day show did a 0.38 buy rate and $3.08 million in company pay-per-view revenue. Probably 2/3 of the buy rate and 3/4 of the gross there. That's pretty rough. Dave does say that May was a bad month, but you should note that the Friends ending was a big deal for SmackDown rating. You shouldn't hold that against them. Also, SmackDown houses have been helped by having Eddie in the Southwest, and then they were in Toronto as well, which is always strong. Ticket sales for SmackDown have not declined as much as ratings and buy rates did, so that's a good thing. But Dave also says that this whole inflection point, everybody can point to the reason is it dates back to the draft lottery where SmackDown came out right away as the B team. So the writing was on the wall the day after WrestleMania, basically.
Yep.
All right, brother. So take us to our next SmackDown.
This is the May 27th edition of SmackDown. Paul Heyman tells the Dudleys that they've been winning matches for 8 years, but they haven't made an impact to be main events and the main event money. He said that even though a Dudley beat Eddie on TV, JBL got the match. Booker did a promo, and even with Undertaker things happening, no voodoo, it appears to have been dropped. So, sighs all around.
Yeah. R.I.P. Bookie, man.
R.I.P. The Dudleys beat up and abducted Paul Heyman. Cena wins a lumberjack match over Rene Dupree, clean as a sheet with an FU.
Okay, so the SmackDown rating on that show did a 2.92, 4.44 million viewers. Dave said the rating was really bad because it went against virtually all rerun programming. For example, Friends was down to a 4.93, CSI did a 9.96, while Friends usually triples that and CSI doubles those numbers. So not a good number here, but less people watching TV overall for some reason. But could have been Memorial Day weekend, I'm assuming. So maybe
that would have been Memorial Day weekend.
House shows have Eddie pinning JBL in 3-minute matches right now after a belt shot with a lot of smoke and mirrors due to both wrestlers being banged up. So it's interesting to see the evolution of this feud along the house shows.
Yeah.
Okay, brothers, so we are almost there. But before we get there, we would be remiss if we did not bring up from the June 14th, 2004 Wrestling Observer newsletter. John Layfield caused a lot of controversy and lost his CNBC job stemming from his actions at the 6-5 show in Munich, Germany, where he kept goose-stepping and making Nazi signs on 6 occasions. The actions took place during a series of matches that started with the singles match with Eddie Guerrero, turned into a handicap match when Booker T joined in, and then finished as a tag match when The Undertaker helped out Guerrero. According to reports, fans didn't find this entertaining, and the obvious reason he did it was to get heel heat. Goose-stepping and saluting Hitler are illegal in Germany, although he may not have known that. No charges were filed, and Bradshaw worked the next night in Oberhausen, doing neither action nor gesture, and left the country without incident. There were a lot of reporters present, as this was the first time in 8 years the WWE had been to Munich. The press was ready to write stories about it after Oberhausen, but since he didn't do it there, nothing was written. On 6/8, CNBC issued a press release stating, quote, CNBC has terminated its relationship with John Bradshaw Layfield following his conduct this past weekend in a wrestling match. We find his behavior to be offensive, inappropriate, and not befitting anyone associated with our network. While there had been no mainstream publicity in the U.S. for his actions in the Munich initially, his getting fired and the reasons for it was expected to have made many newspapers around the country on 6/9. Officials with both CNBC and WWE were said to have been embarrassed by the story breaking. Both were put in an indefensible public relations position. Layfield, by all accounts, made the decision to do it on his own. He was not instructed to do it. After the incident, he was told not to do it again and did nothing of the sort on the 6/6 show. On the company's website on 6/8, both WWE and Layfield apologized for the actions and to anyone offended by it, and it said Layfield had been reprimanded. So there is our pre-show. Take us to our next SmackDown there, John.
Yes, the June 3rd SmackDown. The show opens with a Booker T promo. John Cena cuts him off. Booker then jumps John Cena. Angle breaks it up. He says that he's going to strip John Cena of the U.S. title and throws Cena out of the building. Eddie Guerrero pinned Danny Basham. JBL announced the bull rope match for Great American Bash. The Undertaker and Booker T ended with Taker giving Booker T a chokeslam. Paul Heyman coming out and giving him the choice of either joining Paul Heyman or never seeing Paul Bearer again. So we get the seeds here of a big Undertaker Paul Heyman angle.
The original plan was for Cena's segment to lead to Luther Reigns, but they did a couple of house show matches and then the plans changed. I guess that they weren't TV ready yet.
Yeah, no kidding.
The rating for this show was back up to a 3.26, and it actually outdrew the Lightning Flame Stanley Cup game on ABC, which, if you want craziness, John, we are doing the 20-year anniversary of this, where the Lightning beat the Flames. The Panthers just beat the Oilers.
Yeah.
Florida beat Canada. Again.
Yeah, that's crazy. That's weird.
It is weird. Speaking of weird, there's a weird happening at the house shows in Germany. So during the Oberhausen match it was Eddie Guerrero and Bradshaw, they said that Eddie snapped whenever a small Eddie sucks chant started. And he snapped in a manner that Dave literally said was unprofessional and killed the match. So Eddie's reported to have looked like he wanted to fight a fan after the match, and fans who were cheering him were upset at how quickly he turned on the entire audience after only a few boos. Eddie is said to be in really bad shape, exhausted from the trip, still feeling the effects of blood loss from the pay-per-view match, and is in physical pain. However, because of his position, he feels the pressure to keep going. There's also the pressure of playing the bad houses when nobody is blaming him. And man, you go back and you listen to those Bruce episodes and all that, whenever they say, which at that time I thought it was a cop-out to, whenever they said that Eddie was breaking, like we had to get it off of him.
Yeah.
These things make you feel like Eddie's breaking, we need to get it off of him.
Right. When you hear all of it laid out in a row. Yeah, that's crazy.
John Layfield being fired by CNBC just a few weeks after starting due to his Nazi gestures at the 6/5 house show in Munich made press all over the U.S., including the New York Post, Washington Post, and was discussed on the Howard Stern show. Layfield was anything but contrite or apologetic, as a WWE website statement that it was quickly taking down would indicate. Layfield mentioned that he had done Nazi gestures while playing heel for the WWE before in 1996, as well as for a German wrestling promotion. He wrestled and lived in Germany at one point. The name was John Hawk, working for Otto Wance's old CWA in the early 90s. So JBL's doubling down here. He said, they hung me out to dry. I was playing a character. It's the same as Vin Diesel playing a Nazi, noting that he felt that his job was to incite the German crowd to cheer that night for EddieGuerrero. He then says, quote, I'm a bad guy. I'm supposed to incite the crowd. I've done the gestures for decades. I really didn't think anything of it. I know how bad it is. I've lived in Germany. I've seen the places where they exterminated millions of Jews, end quote. Layfield also compared what he did in the ring to being pegged on him, like saying that Anthony Hopkins was really a cannibal. He said CNBC was well aware of the nature of his heel character before he signed with them just 3 weeks earlier, and even had it put into his contract that they understood that he played a heel. He said that they understood and told him he could do whatever he wanted in wrestling as long as he didn't play someone who cheated or defrauded the stock market.
Wow. Jeez.
So dude, JBL goes scorched earth.
He does.
And this is weird because nobody should be goose stepping in Highland the Fuhrer. But whenever he lays it out in, I did this before, which that's the perspective that you need to have.
Yeah.
Is that if he did it within 10 years working for the same company, and now his whole thing is, learn your English and kick you across the border, like to be the biggest jerk possible.
Yeah.
I guess it's more understandable. It's not more forgivable, but it's more understandable. Do you get what I'm trying to say here?
I get what you're saying. It's not unforgivable, but it is in a weird way understandable.
Yeah, that's it. Is that I still think he's a jerk off for many other reasons other than this. Do you know what I'm saying?
Right.
But like his contract says he's a heel, allowed to do whatever he wants, and he did it before. He did it within 10 years. I mean, that's the thing is, if it was a problem the first time, somebody should have said, buddy, you can't do this. Because the dirty secret, if people don't know that are listening, is that in American wrestling, throughout the 50s, 60s, 70s, there were Nazis all over the place in wrestling. It's not like it's a new thing. The problem is that he did it over there to get heat from them. Right. Instead of it being the foreign heel, he went into there and tried to rub their nose into their own, horrors and atrocities, which is a shame.
Right.
All right, brother, hit us with our next SmackDown. What you got?
The June 10th SmackDown, Angle ordered Booker and Cena to apologize for hitting him the week before. Booker does, but John Cena doesn't. Angle orders a series of 5-minute matches, and the first person to beat Cena gets the title shot at the Great American Bash. Kenzo Suzuki debuted, and Cena went on to a draw with Booker T, RVD, and then Dupree. Angle ordered the Dupree match to continue. Cena won with the FU. Angle then orders a 4-way for the U.S. title at the Great American Bash. Bradshaw came in his limo. He says that he's going to Manhattan, and then he finds Eddie as his new limo driver. Eddie crashes the limo all over the place. Bradshaw is KO'd in the back seat. When he comes to, he sees a destroyed limo. He goes wild. The final segment had Heyman cutting a promo on The Undertaker, and The Undertaker, instead of attacking Heyman, bowed to the urn when Heyman brought it out.
Okay, man. The bridge I have from this to the next is the Chavo Classic was fired on 6/15 for missing house shows the 2 previous nights without calling ahead of time. His son tried to reach him, but he didn't call back. He did not show up in Chicago, but when he was told he was done and was asked, he complied and politely, cleanly dropped the Cruiserweight title to Rey Mysterio. So he did business on the way out.
Good for him.
All right, man. We are 2 show summaries away from the main event. So give us the June 17th SmackDown rundown.
Yes, the Dudleys beat Rico and Haas to win the tag titles. Heyman came out and announced that The Undertaker will face the Dudleys in a handicap match at the Great American Bash, and then brought out a cement mixer and a coffin. If The Undertaker didn't do the right thing, Paul Bearer would be suffocated. The 4-way is announced as an elimination match for the U.S. title. Eddie then pinned Doug Basham in a match. JBL cut a promo on CNBC firing him and promised another bloodbath at the pay-per-view. Mysterio pinned Chavo Classic, like we just mentioned, to win the Cruiserweight title. To end the show, The Undertaker chokeslammed RVD and tombstoned John Cena to end their tag match against Booker and Rene Dupree. Undertaker's being controlled by the Urn and Paul Heyman.
Okay, brother, before we get to the go-home show, the SmackDown crew was not in a good mood at all this week as all of its scheduled house shows were canceled due to poor advances.
Wow.
And then they got the word that the 626 show in Trenton next week was also canceled, making 4 shows in a row. That's $500 per night out the window for bottom guys and more for middle and top guys. The word is that the SmackDown upcoming dates and even the TV tapings are not showing much life.
Man.
So our go-home show, brother.
That is the June 24th SmackDown. John Cena came out to open the show and wanted The Undertaker to apologize to him. Kurt Angle comes out and ordered Cena versus Undertaker as your main event. Chavo won a battle royal for a shot at Rey Mysterio and the Cruiserweight Championship at the Bash. Bob Holly and Mordecai were all backstage, and oh my gosh, I can't believe that's this thing. And Kenzo Suzuki threw salt into Billy Gunn's eyes to get the DQ after Billy Gunn hit a famouser. Eddie Guerrero beat Luther Reigns via DQ when Bradshaw ran in. In the main event, Undertaker pinned John Cena after hitting Cena with his chain and then a tombstone. Heyman came out and Undertaker bent down on one knee as the show went off the air.
All right, man. So there we are. We have made it the entire way to our main event. The WWE Great American Bash 2004 took place on June 27th from the Norfolk Scope Arena in Norfolk, Virginia. The show did a disappointing crowd of 6,500 fans for the first ever WWE pay-per-view at the Scope, with about 5,500 paying $320,000. The show got 8% thumbs up, 78.2% thumbs down, and 13.7% thumbs in the middle.
Wow.
The best match was Rey Mysterio and Chavo Guerrero. Second, and getting only about half the votes, was Eddie Guerrero versus JBL, but it was still the second best match of the night. Worst match poll was a virtual tie. Billy Gunn versus Kenzo Suzuki and Torrie Wilson versus Sable. So that goes to tell you something about how that went for those guys.
Yeah. Oh my gosh.
Dave leads us in with Goose stepping your way to the WWE title. Storyline Homicide were the themes of what were the worst WWE pay-per-view show in a long time. One of the key reasons WWE business overall, even with popularity failing, looks nothing like WCW is because WWE maintained a large percentage of its pay-per-view audience. The reason? Unlike WCW at the end, WWE pay-per-views consistently deliver, but a collection of matches, most of which had no storyline build-up, featuring talent that wasn't ready for the pay-per-view stage, led to a sad undercard. JBL became the most unlikely WWE champion, with the possible exception of Vince McMahon, in company history by winning a bull rope match over Eddie Guerrero, ending a planned long-term reign that wound up lasting 4 months. Check the Mania 20 show.
Yes.
The title change to JBL was a relatively recent decision. It was McMahon's decision as much to get the belt off Guerrero as there was a feeling that it was time for a heel champion to be chased. While Guerrero is far more popular than JBL amongst most of the wrestlers, and the reaction we got was negative to the decision, from a box office standpoint, it really doesn't matter at this point. JBL's character has been thought of strongly by McMahon from the start. Michael Hayes and Bruce Pritchard were also said to have been strong advocates of JBL as champion. JBL was helped greatly by the controversy because putting the belt on him enabled Vince, in his own mind, to thumb his nose at his detractors and win what was really an imaginary fight.
Oh my God.
They did say that throughout that JBL stuff that Vince was sort of took JBL's side because he almost used him as like a spirit animal.
Oh my word.
Besides the final match being a travesty, the show was marred by 4 matches with almost no build up until days before, thrown out, all of which were bad. Go ahead, John.
So we're welcome into the show by Torrie Wilson, and for all intents and purposes, this show, when you watch it, it can be broken up into 3 parts. With the beginning 3 matches are really good. The middle three are absolute dog shit. And then the two main events, I enjoyed the main events. And so we're in for a wild one here. But our first match is the Fatal 4-Way elimination for the United States title. It is John Cena defending against Rene Dupree and Booker T and RVD. John Cena comes out for his promo, and dude, what a jersey. The Virginia Tech Vic jersey. Oh my word, that thing was a grail. That thing is amazing. Didn't live long after that, but it's a great jersey for that time. He was so over, but this match was kind of strange from the beginning. It felt kind of like a lumberjack hybrid style match. Two men usually in the ring, while the other two participants were waiting on the outside to either conserve energy, I guess, or just outsmart each other. But Taz popped me huge when Rene Dupree was doing his little French tickler dance, and he said, "I'm a Frenchman. I'm a French tickler. I tickle Frenchmen." I blew my head exploded. I was laughing so hard. RVD is eliminated first after handing out back-to-back frog splashes to Rene Dupree and Booker T. Cena ran in and rolled RVD up, and RVD was eliminated. Cena hits an FU on Dupree, and Booker immediately hits a scissors kick on Cena. Booker then pins Rene Dupree, and the final two were Booker T and John Cena. Booker went for the scissors kick, but Cena was ready for it. He counters, hits the FU, wins clean as a sheet in the middle of the ring, and retains his U.S. title. And this was a really fun match to start the show.
I was with you whenever I watched this because I was wondering why people were waiting outside. And then I realized it was an elimination match. And one of them, and I don't remember, I think it was Taz, said, "Why wouldn't you stand outside? Because you can't get eliminated." And that actually did make sense.
It did. Yeah.
It was weird. I mean, it was weird because typically you're used to action, but that little bit of context did help. Dave said Cena in his rap brought up GI Bro, which was Booker's first ring name and a name that he briefly used in WCW when no one was watching. It appeared that remark was over the head of the crowd. Nothing wrong with the match, but Cena in the ring was clearly not at the level of the other three. I think they'd have wanted more out of this bout. 2 stars.
John Cena heads to the back and he starts flirting with Jackie Gata while Charlie Haas is standing there. As Cena walks off, Angle wheels in and asks Charlie Haas what's happened to him. He used to be all about wrestling when he was his protege, and now he's all about Miss Jackie. And Angle announces that he's going to face his new protege, Luther Reigns. Then we get Sable sitting in a hot tub, and she says that she's more red, white, and blue than Tori, and she's going to interview herself, and it was a absolute terrible segment, and our match is set for later, Tori Wilson versus Sable. But our second match of the night is Charlie Haas versus Luther Reigns. This match was a ton of power moves in the beginning by Reigns, but the worst part is they sunk in rest holds right after that, and it felt like they took forever. It got really boring really quick. Reigns wins after hitting a really impressive neck breaker. I can't remember what they called that. I believe that they called it the Reign of Terror, which is actually really funny because we're actually in that with Triple H on the other brand, but it was really impressive. It was awesome.
I thought that it was Crossroads. Like when
kind of like a reverse Crossroads.
Like when he grabbed them. I was like, did he just hit a Crossroads right here? So Dave said Reigns looked bad. He needed to have spent months talking before being put into the ring because the in-ring is never going to be his thing. He won with a move that starts as a reverse DDT and ends up as a neck breaker. They badly need to give catchy names to these new guys' finishers. 1 star.
I want to say something about this match too. When Charlie Haas bumps in the ring, it sounds ridiculously loud. I don't know what they were doing with the rings at this time in this era, but it sounds so loud. JBL is backstage and he's saying that he guaranteed victory at Judgment Day, but Eddie purposefully got himself disqualified. That cannot happen tonight because of their Texas Bull Rope match is a non-disqualification. He says he's been vilified by the press, the people, and he would say his peers, but he has no peers.
That's a heck of a line.
It was so good. Today is a day of reckoning and vindication. He then cuts a promo on Norfolk for being patriotic but not liking him, and we head to our next match, and this was what we said earlier, match of the night. It's Chavo Jr. versus Rey Mysterio for the cruiserweight title. These guys put on a cruiserweight display that it wasn't like your traditional cruiserweight style match. It was more like a technical cruiserweight style match. And if you've been following along here on the Podski, they've been doing this feud for a while now, and it felt like it actually meant something. The only bad thing about the match was there was some dude in the crowd yelling, Chavo, and it was so annoying. Oh, I couldn't wait to that guy. I just wanted him to shut up so badly. Chavo knocked Rey off the top rope, and Rey fell awkwardly onto his knee, and Rey's knee would be the story of the match here. Rey kicked out of a gory bomb. Rey hit the 619, but the West Coast pop was reversed into a single leg crab. This was really cool. Chavo then went for another gory bomb, but Rey countered with the spin through and the pin to retain the cruiserweight title. It was an awesome finish.
Yep. Dave says very psychologically sound, and from a technical standpoint, this was easily the best thing on the show. 3.25.
We get Tori Wilson in a hot tub with Billy Kidman, Funaki, and Spike Dudley. Tori asked them if they were surprised that Rey retained his title, and as the guys argue back and forth, Tori just stands up and says she's got to get ready for her match with Sable, and Funaki says, God bless America, as she walks away.
What a line. So before we move in, if I may interject here, I do have some background info on one of our next competitors. So from the Observer newsletter, Kenzo Suzuki's wife did an interview in May where she said that they came to a meeting with Vince. Vince presented them with the Hirohito gimmick, Kenzo's costume, all that was laid out for them. And she was adamant that this not be done. She took management through all the issues with the character from a personal, from a cultural standpoint. And the WWE management was allegedly so shocked that she was so strong with it that it ended up with Vince offering her a job. So he was so impressed by her coming in saying, no way. And she was, she mentioned last time that we did the show here that she is a Japanese television anchor. She's got look, she's got all that stuff. She has camera presence. And so, yeah, they offered her a job after that. So they literally took away the Hirohito thing because of Kenzo's wife. The bad thing with this is that it also pulled out from him the main event push that he was supposed to get against Chris Benoit. Bad for him, not bad for the viewers, but bad for him.
Correct. Well, we'll follow that up with our worst match of the night is Kenzo Suzuki versus Billy Gunn. I hate to say that this one's not worse than the Sable and Tori match, but this one's a right close second. The crowd was so dead for this. Kenzo wins after giving Billy a low blow, and I don't know what the finisher was, but it was not good. This was just bad. Really, really bad.
Dave says the crowd was dead. The show started falling apart here. Suzuki's push is that he's a personal product of John Laurinaitis, who saw something in him that no one else sees. Can you believe that? Having never seen him wrestle, even though there's plenty of tapes of him available, this guy is booked to headline all summer against Chris Benoit before it was dropped because his planned gimmick was recognized as a bad idea. -1 star.
Yes, that match kicks off what is the dog shit part of the show. So if you're watching the show, you just want to skip over this. This was kind of interesting. Paul Heyman has Paul Bearer tied up somewhere backstage saying that everyone thinks he's kidding about burying Paul Bearer alive. And if the Undertaker doesn't do the right thing, he's going to have no problems pulling that lever and pouring concrete onto Paul Bearer, burying him alive. But next is, I can't believe I'm saying this, Tori versus Sable. This actually happened again.
2004.
Yes, again, this happened. The crowd was dead for a good reason. This was bad. They were clearly in the gutter days of the Divas era. Sable finally won with a schoolgirl, and thank God it was finally over.
Dave said the only thing entertaining here was when Michael Cole talked about how the crowd was chanting for Tori, and if you looked at the crowd, they were dead. The finish was so bad that Cole and Taz had to say how referee Charles Robinson counted when her shoulders weren't even down, which, dude, they were both way up.
Yeah, they were so up.
But But then he says that I thought the refs were instructed to call a match as if it was a shoot. I guess with these two in there, he didn't trust the two to follow the original plan and force them to improvise. -1 star. Same rating that Billy and Kenzo got. Good for you two.
We go backstage again, and Dawn Marie is at the Great American Hot Tub, and she is interviewing Rene Dupree, saying that he got screwed in his U.S. title match. He's going to do what all Frenchmen know how to do, and that is protest, and he's going to get a rematch. And then he starts hitting on Dawn. The FBI then interferes, and Nunzio he's making Dawn look at his big feet, saying he's got size 15 feet. And you know what that means? Wink, wink. This was just the gutter days.
Dude, there's a lot of FBI stuff that we have cut out of those SmackDown reviews for good reasons.
So we come out of the worst two matches of the night to follow it up with another turd sandwich. It is Mordecai versus Hardcore Holly. And if you're a frequent listener of the Podski, you know how this ended up for Bob Holly. Holly tied up Mordecai with the ropes right away and started beating him. They grazed Mordecai's staff on the outside, and you could tell that this thing was literally 5 pounds, and it started wobbling, and it almost fell over. They almost killed the gimmick instantly. Holly laid his shit in on Mordecai, but he hits Holly with the crucifix bomb, and it's basically just a razor's edge for the win. And this, we need less Bob Holly on this show.
So I texted John as a shoot while I was watching this and said, can we watch one bleeping show without Hardcore Holly? Like, look, man, I've had enough. I'm tapping out.
We can't escape him. He's on every single show. Gosh.
Bob Holly and Scotty 2 Hotty, man. They're with us, man. Dave said they made a big mistake having Mordecai sell so much because it went from the powerful squash it needed to be to a boring match that hurt the guy who won. Holly was making the new guy pay with hard clotheslines, which is well and good, but that's not how you elevate a newcomer getting geared up for an Undertaker or Guerrero match. After this one, maybe they'll have second thoughts. 1/2 star.
Yeah, you're dang right. They're going to have second thoughts. But we finally come out of the terrible section of the show, and we head to our main events. We have EddieGuerrero versus JBL in the Texas Bull Rope match for the WWE Championship. The only issue is that Tony Chimmel, man, shout out to Tony Chimmel reading this, because he was reading everything on the card and he almost lost his place, but he powered through onto the other side. So shout outs to you. Essentially, you have to hit all 4 corners in the ring. And if that chain of touches are broken, you got to start over. This match was so well worked. They went all out for this thing. The story being that both men would get close, but there was always a huge obstacle for the last turnbuckle. JBL would be too heavy for Eddie, or Eddie would be holding on for dear life to the rope for JBL and he couldn't reach it. We get the Judgment Day receipt as Eddie hits the hell out of JBL with a chair shot, and he started bleeding all over the place. JBL then beeled Eddie off the middle rope onto the Spanish announce table, and this looked brutal because the table didn't break at all. The match came down to both men hitting all 3 corners in a row, and it came down to one final turnbuckle. Eddie jumped over JBL to touch the turnbuckle, but since JBL's back touched first, JBL is your champion. This was such a clever finish for a shit heel and a guy that is so hated, and the way that he wins, it was perfect. And I just remember this being such a big deal, and I loved Eddie so much then, and I was just so heartbroken whenever they gave the title to JBL.
I thought this was awesome.
It was so good.
I'm serious. I thought this was awesome. And especially, like, I would rather rewatch this than watch Eddie bleed gallons, because I don't need to see anybody bleed gallons. Do you know what I mean?
Yep.
And so while the other one was, more brutal and was a straight wrestling match, quote unquote, I thought you said it, dude. This was so well worked, and I was not expecting to see what I saw.
Right.
I thought the lights being up was a great touch.
Yes.
I really did. I thought that was really well done. I knew that JBL was walking out of this with the title, and I didn't know how. And when I saw how, I was like, oh my, that's good.
Yeah, it is.
You know, like overall, dude, like this is an ovation from me. Like this is great job booking, especially booking a rotten heel who everybody should hate for good reason.
Mhm.
Why not have him win the belt in a way that makes you hate him even more?
Right.
So Dave said, as someone who saw tons of bull rope matches involving Dusty Rhodes and others, it's not the easiest match to work, and they did a good job. This wasn't as good as the Los Angeles match. Cole called Guerrero's car wrong, prompting Taz to say that he didn't know his wrestling or his cars. I thought that was funny. When fans realized Guerrero lost the title, he got a hell of a reaction out of appreciation at the end. 3.25 star.
And our main event is the Undertaker versus the Dudleys in the handicap match. I remember this again, and I was legitimately mortified. 12 years old, kayfabe is alive. It's still real to me, damn it. But I thought that they legitimately killed Paul Bearer on television. We got a sweet Undertaker entrance to start off the match. Bubba opens his mouth as usual, starts on the mic, trying to get Undertaker to lay down. Taker does, and he grabs Bubba by the throat, and every time the Undertaker doesn't lay down for the Dudleys, Heyman fills the crypt with cement. Heyman screaming, "Bad dog, bad dog, bad dog." That was like, it was hilarious, the fact that he was calling him the big dog here. The other thing that I was finding hilarious was Paul Bearer screaming, "To hell with you and damn you." to Paul Heyman. It was so funny. The match wasn't great, and we all know that we're not Dudley fans here, but Taker gets the win, but Paul says that he's going to do the right thing since Undertaker can't do it. Taker slowly makes his way up the ramp to a screaming Paul Heyman, Bearer saying, "Save me," to the Undertaker as he bends the knee. He slowly looks up at the cement truck, walks over to the lever, looks at Paul and says, "I have no other choice. Rest in peace." Pulls down the lever and he buries Paul Bearer in the crypt. And that's how we go off the air.
I remember watching this live and thinking, what in the world did I just see?
I was so scared, dude. I was mortified. I thought,
yeah,
killed a guy on TV, man. And to find out that it's just oatmeal, as Bruce revealed later on, years down the road.
So Dave says Bearer kept saying Undertaker would never let him die, and it became so obnoxious about it that people would have half wanted him gone if they cared. This was just dying, as if it felt like people just didn't want wrestling to turn into this, and they didn't have their finger on the pulse. A major flop of a main event, 1 star. So I got some post-match nugs for you before we break, John.
Gotcha.
First one. Paul Bearer was not actually inside the crypt, but instead they had someone dressed up like him. The close-up shots that they aired on the screen were filmed earlier in the day. When Heyman pulled the lever for the cement to come out the first time, there was a snafu in the building, and no cement came out. However, on the screen, they used a pre-tape, which showed Bearer in a case filling up. The guy in the crypt was buried underneath the cement for a few seconds before they opened the door, and then all the cement poured open. The interesting thing here is that Paul Bearer signed a 3-year deal in late 2003 because they were bringing him back with The Undertaker.
Right.
And now they don't have anything to do with him because they killed him. So Dave says he'll have a front office role for the remainder of his contract. He said the reaction to the angle was very negative. Fans leaving the scope were said to be quiet, reacting as if this was hardly what they wanted to see out of pro wrestling. The curiosity over the Undertaker character has increased SmackDown ratings and strongly increases quarter hours, but it's not certain where it ends. Dave says that there's been talk of putting The Undertaker with Heyman as a full-fledged heel. Not the most likely because there's heat from Taker and Heyman still from when Heyman had the book and wanted Taker to be putting younger guys over rather than being the big dog that just beat everybody.
Wow. I didn't know. That's interesting.
Yep. And so it also says that Vince McMahon wanted The Undertaker to be a tweener who could work with anyone, figuring the fans would keep him babyface because it would take a lot to get them to boo him. There are 3 ways with JBL versus Guerrero versus The Undertaker booked. As things currently stand, the plan for SummerSlam is JBL versus Undertaker for the title, with Undertaker as a face, and Guerrero versus Kurt Angle. Angle is medically cleared to wrestle after injuring his neck, but the plan is to hold off his return until SummerSlam. Angle could also work with Cena since that was his main rival as the GM. If Guerrero is put into the title mix instead, so if they have like a three-way there, that we could have Cena versus Angle. And then he does note that working with Guerrero in a single would put a lot of pressure on Angle in what would likely be his first match back, because fans would have high expectations for the match. So that is where we leave coming out of Great American Bash.
Yes, and we are going to be doing SummerSlam 2004 here on the show, but next week we have Vengeance 2004. So all of these quick shows that we mentioned here, we did Bad Blood, we got Great American Bash today. We're going to follow that up next week with Vengeance, as WWE ran 3 shows in 6 weeks, 3 pay-per-views in 6 weeks. So we're going to do that here on the Podski. We're going to cap that off, and we got a brand new lineup coming to you for the month of July that we'll be posting. So we thank you all for subscribing. The Eddie Show will be coming soon. We're still working on that. And keep subscribing, because we're getting ever so closer to that Scott Hall show too. So with all your support, we're going to get there. And we thank you all for listening. And we will see you next time on the Podski.